I'm Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. Today is the anniversary of 9/11. I rushed back from DC so I could be present at this morning's ceremony, where the names of those who died on that terrible day are read aloud and remembered. It's an incredibly moving experience to hear that ceremony and to remember that almost 3,000 New Yorkers died that day, but many more lost their health care because they worked at the hazardous site. For 18 years, I worked to pass a bill known as the James Zadroga Health and Compensation Act, which gave health care and compensation to our heroes and heroines. They rushed in to save our lives. It's important that we are there now to give them the health care they so justly deserve. I'm proud of having authored and passed that bill. It took me 18 years to do it. So you can't say that I'm not determined and that I don't work hard and that I don't persevere for what I believe in. Now, I want to go back to Congress to continue to work towards expanding access to affordable and available health care by strengthening the Affordable Care Act and passing Medicare for all. I don't know how anyone could live through this pandemic and not agree that health care is a human right. As a former teacher, I'm dedicated to education, to supporting the teachers, parents, staff, and students, and I'm working to make sure that our schools and localities have the funding they need to ensure our children can learn safely, our teachers can teach safely during this pandemic. And as all New Yorkers know, transportation has always been a huge priority of mine. I've brought over $10 billion in federal funding home to my district since I've been in Congress, and I have the two largest infrastructure projects, not in New York City, not New York State, but in the entire country in the district I represent. And I worked hard to bring those federal dollars to build them. The Second Avenue subway is the only subway that has been built in our country during the time I've been in Congress. It was planned for 100 years. It was a priority of mine when I went to Congress. I made it happen. And the other is the East Side Connector, which connects the LIRR from Queens to Manhattan and modernizes Grand Central for the 21st century. I have the honor of representing three boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. When I was first elected, the worst bridge in the state with the most accidents and delays connected the Queens and Brooklyn parts of my district, the Kosciuszko Bridge. It is now the best bridge in our country. 9 lanes, totally modern and built with over $900 million in federal funds. And I'm proud of bringing the money in to modernize the L train, connecting Brooklyn and Manhattan with almost $1 billion in federal funding. When I see a problem, I work hard, I attack it. I have a long history of passing important legislation, which you can read more about on my website, carolynmaloney.com. That's why I was listed the #1 leader in Congress by GovTrack. My priorities are better health care, more jobs, housing, public housing, passing the Green New Deal, education, and transportation. I view public service as a loan, one which I must repay each and every day I'm in office. I hope my work in Congress continues to merit your support. Thank you.
My name is Carlos Santiago-Cano. I am running for Congress to represent you, the people of the 12th Congressional District. Our current elected official is a career politician that has been there for over 30 years. She's been in politics for 40 years. And yet, after decades in office, we get no results in our district for our people. Affordable housing in our district, in our city, is non-existent. The homeless population of the city has been increasing every single year. Our transportation system is crumbling. Affordable healthcare is non-existent, right? And big businesses keep being prioritized over small businesses. It is time for new leadership in our city. It is time for elected officials to be held accountable for their broken promises. Every 2 years, the current Congresswoman makes the same promises about fixing all these issues I just mentioned. And yet, every single election, she gets nothing done. Together, with your help, we can take our city back. We can make New York City the city that it should be, and make it the city that will set an example for the rest of the country. It is time to end party politics and start working for the people that we represent. I look forward to earning your support, and please vote, come out and vote November 3rd. Thank you.
Welcome to Represent NYC Election Coverage, brought to you by Manhattan Neighborhood Network in partnership with the League of Women Voters of New York State. My name is Ben Max. I'm the executive editor of Gotham Gazette. New Yorkers are voting in the general election for races including president and vice president, the United States Congress, the New York State Senate and Assembly, and more. All registered voters can vote either by absentee ballot or by voting in person, either through the early voting period, October 24th through November 1st, or on Election Day, November 3rd. The state of New York has 27 seats in the United States House of Representatives, all of which are on the ballot this fall. And we're pleased to bring you a candidate debate for New York's 12th Congressional District, which includes a large swath of the east side of Manhattan, Roosevelt Island, and parts of Western Queens and Greenpoint, Brooklyn. 3 candidates are on the ballot for this district, 2 of whom are joining me today for this debate. Here with me by Zoom are the incumbent Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who is the Democratic nominee, and Carlos Santiago-Cano, who is the Republican and Conservative Party nominee. Welcome and thank you both for being here. The format of this 30-minute debate is as follows. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question posed and about a minute for rebuttals when needed. Your candidate statements will have just played for our audience, so we're not doing opening statements, but at the end of the debate, each candidate will have time for a 1-minute closing statement. I'll also warn you candidates that as we reach the end of your time to answer, I'll first say a gentle thank you and then give you about 3 more seconds to wrap up before jumping back in to move things along. If you hear me say thank you, please try to start wrapping up your answer. I also may jump in during or toward the end of your answers to ask for clarification or specifics if I think an answer is vague or confusing, or we're just looking for more information for our audience. So don't be surprised if I jump in and say, hold on a second, can we have a little bit more information on something? Please don't interrupt each other. You can always spend the beginning of your next turn speaking, responding to something you previously heard from your opponent. And I'll at times alternate who answers questions first, though it won't always be one then the other, because we want to make sure we have a good flow of the conversation, and we'll see how it goes here. If there's time at the end, I might throw in a few quick yes or no type questions so that voters and viewers can get to know as much about you as possible in the time we have and your approach to being a member of the United States Congress. And again, at the end of the debate, you'll have 1 minute for a closing statement. So let's get started here. Let's talk about experience and the role of being a member of the US Congress. Mr. Santiago-Cano, you're seeking elected office. What makes you qualified to be a member of Congress, and what about your resume makes you prepared to enter the House of Representatives? You have 2 minutes, go ahead.
Thank you, Ben. So a number of things here. So I am a small business owner in New York City. I've started 2 companies here in New York from scratch, and I've built my businesses to a point now where they have a very solid base. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I know what it's like to start a business from the beginning, to not only maintain that business, but to keep that business afloat during difficult times. I employ a number of people in my businesses. And aside from my entrepreneurial experience, I am a proud graduate of the public school system of New York. I strongly believe that members of Congress that are representing people in their districts and advocating for things like education and helping small businesses have to be connected to those constituents. I feel that my experience from coming from public school and my experience as an entrepreneur in this city, my experience from growing up in New York City from the time I was a child till now, makes me qualified to represent the people of this district. I also believe that we need new, fresh, innovative ideas to move forward to the future. I strongly feel that a lot of the policies that Congress currently has and a lot of the individuals in Congress are out of touch with the people in their districts because they have just been in office for so long and they have really lost that connection with the people in their districts.
Okay, thank you. And just quickly, since we have a few more seconds in your time, you mentioned the idea, the notion of the need for big ideas. Is there one that you would name for voters that is a big idea of yours that you're trying to get them to support?
Yeah, well, there are a number of things. When it comes to homelessness, affordable housing, and safety in the city, these have been major problems that have been affecting New York City over 25 years, which is the time that Congresswoman has been in office. Okay. So those are probably some of the main things I would like to.
Okay, well, I think in the course of this debate, we'll be looking for what your answers are to those questions. But Congresswoman Maloney, what makes you deserving of re-election? What have been some of the major accomplishments that you think voters should send you back to Congress because of?
I've been effective first as a New York City school teacher, then as an aide to two speakers and the Democratic leader in the United States, or rather New York State Assembly and Senate. And then on the City Council, I literally founded the Contracts Committee to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm proud of that work. And then in Congress, I'm not only the chair of the Oversight Committee, which gives me an even stronger voice for the concerns of my city, but I've been effective in bringing federal dollars to our city. Most notably, I wanted to build the 2nd Avenue subway. It had been 100 years in planning. It is the only subway that's been built in New York City, state, or in the entire country. Since I've been in Congress, it has created jobs and improved the quality of life. I brought $800 million for the Kosciuszko Bridge, connecting the Queens and Brooklyn section of my district, $1 billion for modernization of the L train, and another several $billion for the East Side Connector, and then the resiliency program that we have. I've passed and authored over 80 bills, progressive bills, new ideas, as my opponent said. 10 of them were in the bill signings with presidents of the United States, as reserved for landmark bills. Probably most notable was the so-called Credit Card Bill of Rights, that according to several outside concerns has said that this bill alone saves you, the consumer, over $10 billion a year by cutting unfair deceptive practices. I have built 7 not public housing, but senior housing projects jointly with the private sector and federal funds. And I'm not stopping now. We need to invest in even more. And the waterfront, I've been committed to building the waterfront in Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. The East Side Esplanade has over $250 million. The whole Bushwick Inland Park, $125 million. And then the Queens Bridge waterfront that we've helped, particularly in front. I see my time is up.
Thank you.
I'm warming up. I could keep going on all these things.
Well, we'll give you a chance. We'll give you a chance to go a little further on some of those, but let's come back to the challenger first, Mr. Santiago-Cano. Let's talk about the district a little bit more. Both of your answers got a bit at district needs. We're obviously still in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, both from a public health standpoint and the socioeconomic effects. What do you see as the biggest needs of this district right now, and what would you do in Congress to address those needs? Go ahead, Mr. Santiago-Cano.
Well, I think one of the biggest needs in the district is help to small businesses, especially restaurants and bars. Our district has a large number of restaurants and bars that have been greatly affected by the COVID-19 crisis. I think that it has been very responsible that Congress passed funding for businesses that ended up going to million-dollar companies that report millions of dollars in profit every single quarter, as opposed to those funds going to the small businesses in the districts that really need them, right? Aside from that, I think that there has been too many delays in allowing restaurants to operate indoor seating, especially in New York City. I understand that we have to be precautious, but there's no reason why restaurants cannot be operating at least at 50% capacity if they have safety protocols in place and if they have a low number of infections in the area. I think that small businesses need much more help than what they got. And I think the current gridlock in Washington, D.C. is unacceptable. It is unacceptable that funds that were already approved are not being released just because they want another $1 trillion to bail out states that were already doing bad even before the COVID crisis.
Thank you. Congresswoman Maloney, the needs of the district and what needs to be done next to address them.
I'd say first and foremost, the needs of our district right now is responded to the COVID-19 crisis, the worst that I've experienced in my lifetime. I am part of the leadership team on the Democratic side as the chair of oversight that is working on our own package. And right now the Republicans have stopped funding that we have put forward. We came out with a $3.2 billion program. We've come down to $2.2 billion. Let's strike a deal and get it done. So it's been the Republicans that, in my opinion, have not responded in a fair way. I believe, and I agree with my opponent, that we need to help small businesses. They employ many people. They're the lifeblood of our district. I fought and delivered money for the PPP loan grant program and other loan programs. But we have to look at this crisis in a comprehensive way. We can't just fund small businesses and think we're successful. We also, if we don't get money from the federal government, I'm afraid our MTA is going to have to close down. If we hadn't funded them well over $14 billion to this point from the federal government, they would be closed down right now. So we need them to get our essential workers to our hospitals. We need the sanitation. We need everything. In housing particularly, we need the funding for homeless housing and to stop the moratorium on throwing people out of their homes or throwing them out of their apartments. We need so many things in so many ways. But I'm proud of our city literally leading the way, I would say, for the nation in healthcare, not only in treatments. A lot of people are not dying from COVID because they learned how to take care of them, really through the New York City hospital system. To give one example, when we were busting in the seams, we had 50,000 beds. Within 1 week, with the help of the federal government, we expanded to 100,000 beds. That was an incredible achievement. And as we speak to you now, Ben, this is an important part. New York is leading in the fight and the scientific work to come forward with a vaccination and other treatments for this terrible disease that has hurt so many. And I'd like to close by saying, when you look at the charts now, we're in a surge, a resurge of COVID across the country. We have now more people infected than ever before, but New York is not one of those states where the COVID infection, thank God, to this point, is not creeping through the roof as it is in other states. I congratulate the leadership of New York on that.
Just to follow up, you know, the House under Democratic leadership did pass a bill, another relief bill, as you mentioned, but a deal hasn't been struck. Are you and the Democratic leadership in the House doing enough to find that common ground, to convince Senator McConnell and the Senate Republican majority, to convince President Trump to come to some kind of deal that by just about every measure is already quite late for helping the American people, especially people in New York?
I would say whatever we do in this crisis is not enough. I am part of that team. We talk frequently with our leader on it, but there are many things that they are adding to the bill that are harmful, sometimes that people don't see. Now, they want a skinny bill. They want to help small businesses. I do too. And they want the unemployment going to people who desperately need it. They're going to run out by the end of this month. I do too. But they're not considering the mass transit. Can you imagine what New York would look like if we had to close down the mass transit? Now, my opponent just made fun of Democrats wanting to get aid to cities and states because he said they were mismanaged. I don't think New York City is mismanaged. And when the mayor tells me we have a $9 billion deficit, I think it's because New Yorkers worked hard, but what was thrown at us was overwhelming. When our governor says we are going to be laying people off right and left unless we get restored the $30 billion that we gave because we had to. And this is on top of economic policies that the Republicans have thrust on us that make it harder for the city, increasing the amount that we can deduct from for city and state taxes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. No. I think that covers a bit of what your negotiating position is, and that's very interesting.
I can give one concrete example that has tremendous impact, if you'd like to hear it.
Quickly, and then we'll go to your challenger here for his thoughts on what relief should look like.
One of the biggest things that we have that people find boring and they don't look at it is a census. But these census numbers will direct how $1.5 trillion is spent over the next 10 years. For each person who's not counted, it is roughly $27,000 lost for our school system alone. This administration wanted to cut the period for enumeration by a month, which every official said would give us a wrong census. We wouldn't get the fair funding for our city. And very importantly, they want to conclude the apportionment numbers and send them to the president by December 31st. All of the professionals are saying we need until April. And
right, that's going to be a big bone of contention here. I need to come to Mr. Santiago-Cano. On the issue of what federal relief should look like, it sounds like there might be a difference of opinion on whether there should be significant federal funding for state and local governments, especially here in New York, which obviously had the worst COVID outbreak of any state, at least to this point. Mr. Santiago-Cano, what's your opinion of that, and a little bit more of your thoughts on what any relief package should look like, and what a deal should be structured like? Right.
So I strongly believe that $2 trillion, I believe it's 2 trillion, Congresswoman, not 2 billion. I believe
trillion. You're right. I'm sorry. I misspoke. Thank you for
$2 trillion is absolutely too much money. I think the first bill that was passed was a sufficient amount. I really don't believe that a $1 trillion package, like it has been proposed by the other side, it's a skinny package, as the Congresswoman calls it. I also believe that, Congresswoman, I completely agree with you that the MTA does need funding. The MTA, they are the arteries of the city. However, let's not forget the fact that even before COVID, the MTA has suffered from delays, malfunctions, and they have not provided the service that New Yorkers deserve. So if we want to fix the MTA system, we shouldn't be blaming COVID for the issues that the MTA is having. The issues with the MTA go way back before COVID, when millions of dollars have been already allocated, they have not been spent properly. I honestly believe government has become very inefficient in the way that they spend funding. I've spoken to small businesses on First Avenue, Second Avenue, on Stanway Street, and a lot of these businesses, they had trouble getting PPP, getting loans for their businesses during the first bill that passed. Meanwhile, multi-million-dollar companies were able to get loans very easily. Now, the Congresswoman mentioned you're on the oversight committee. I believe, Congresswoman, you should have some power over, making sure that funding goes to the proper places and not to companies that are reporting millions of dollars in profits every single quarter.
So, Mr. Santiago-Cano, just quickly with you, and then we'll come back to the Congresswoman. So is it your position that at this point, there should not be any additional federal aid to the MTA, to the New York State government, and to the New York City government?
There should be aid to specific places, but it has to be targeted, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of the funding that they want to pass is funding to address issues that cities were having way before the COVID crisis. Here in New York, there are many of those issues, not just transportation. We have issues with homelessness. We have issues with affordable housing. We have issues with education. And they want to take the COVID crisis and pass this massive package with trillions of dollars to address issues that were around before COVID. And I believe that's just simply unacceptable. Yes, some local and state governments do need some assistance, but it has to be targeted properly, and we cannot let them take advantage of the situation in order to address problems that they created in the past.
Congressman, I do want to come back on the issue of oversight, and I don't know if you want to take a few seconds at the start of your answer to address the question of oversight of the money that has come out the door already. But my question is more broad than that, coming back to your oversight work. Do you think that the House has done the best it could do in terms of oversight of the Trump administration when it comes to the impeachment process that happened, that seems to have pretty much vanished from public discussion, remarkably, that the president was impeached by the House earlier this year? But was that handled the best it could have been in retrospect at this point? And anything else on oversight that you would have done differently, knowing what you know now in terms of oversight of the Trump administration? Go ahead.
Before answering, I'd like to respond to my opponent. He said that we gave money to multi-million-dollar corporations. That is a mistake. We immediately said they should give it back. Many big companies in New York gave back the money. That's why we were able to help so many other small businesses. We took steps to help small businesses more by creating a whole way of funding those people who just needed $5,000, $10,000. The banks sometimes would not help them. So we got the very small groups, not-for-profits, to help get that money out in the community. My office is working full-time, even now, helping businesses that needed help to get their loans. And call my office, any small business, and we will work with you for the loan process. Also, he said that the $2.2 trillion was too much money. Well, I understand the Republican offer now is $1.8 trillion. We're very close to getting together, but we have certain things that are not money, such as the census fight to get accurate numbers by giving the Bureau enough time to do their work, which is fundamental for the future of our country, that the funding gets where it needs to be. I would say that I am, and it's partly responding to your question, Ben, and to my opponents, I serve also on the subcommittee for the coronavirus, and we are investigating a number of contracts. They come in every day. That people say were misused, particularly in our own state, the Kodak contract, where they gave $250 million to a company that just was created, that had no experience in science or medicine, to create the vaccine. Once we disclosed that, they literally dropped their own contract to take that money. So this is going on every day, trying to make it better. I am one of the 7 leaders on the impeachment. We did impeach the president in the House. Maybe that's one of the reasons that he keeps mentioning me, not only in his debate, but almost every night in his press conferences. And we worked very hard on that. I think it should have passed in the Senate. It did not. And
anything in that process that you would do again? I mean, it almost seems as if you know, the decision to keep it narrow in the topics that you know, other things have come out since. You know, questions about the president's financial dealings, questions arising from the Mueller report. Is there anything you would do differently if you could do that process again?
I would say that narrowing it was a strategy to make it clear that there was a crime committed by the President of the United States. We had several votes on impeachment. At first, I was not for impeaching him. It was after he testified on federal, or rather national television, when asked would he accept aid from a foreign government in this election. He said, yes, of course, why not? Would you accept dirt on your opponent? Oh yes, why? I would love to have it. Clearly in violation of the laws of our Constitution and our people. So there were foreign policy violations that were very clear to understand. When you get into everything, it sort of fogs it. What I would have done differently is I would have tried to work closer with Republicans, because they should care just as much about our country, and I think they do care just as much as anyone else. We should have hired some Republican staff, I believe, as they did in the Watergate. And we should have worked very, very closely with those that were sympathetic on the Republican side, because ultimately we could not win without Republican votes. Elections have consequences. If you have the votes, you win.
Thank you.
We should have focused on getting the votes.
Mr. Santiago-Cano, do you want to comment on the impeachment and the oversight of the Trump administration?
Well, you know, the Congresswoman talked about violation of foreign policy. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, something similar was done by the Obama administration during the 2016 election, right? They were spying on President Trump's campaign, and they were trying to get dirt from foreign governments in order to sabotage President Trump's campaign. So it's really mind-boggling to see the double standard, right? When it's something that benefits the Democrats, then they don't really talk about it or cover it. But when it's something that's going to benefit, then they want to talk about it and cover it, you know, like it hasn't happened before on their own side.
So in your opinion, you don't think there were legitimate reasons for the United States intelligence services to investigate the president's campaign?
I think the impeachment was a waste of time, to be quite honest with you. I think that if Congress would have focused more on the coronavirus crisis that was happening in the beginning of the year, we would have probably been way better off. Instead, they were spending their time impeaching a president that they knew was not going to get approved by the Senate.
Okay.
Right?
So we're unfortunately, we could talk about impeachment and oversight of the Trump administration and the president for hours, of course, but we don't have that time. We're down to our last question and then closing statements. And for the last question, I want you each to talk about healthcare, please. What you think the next Congress should do in terms of healthcare policy. Obviously, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, has been debated, discussed, voted on ad nauseum, but it's still a topic of consideration and debate. So starting with you, Congresswoman Maloney, where do you want to see the healthcare discussion head next after this next election?
Well, I'm very concerned that a factor in the healthcare discussion is who's on the Supreme Court, because the Trump administration right now is suing, they're in court, trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act and the covering of pre-existing conditions. And right now there are 135 Americans that depend on the Affordable Care Act for covering pre-existing conditions. And to show how serious this is, Ben, before the Affordable Care Act, pregnancy was considered a pre-existing condition. Women would come to my office, they couldn't get health insurance because they were pregnant. So the Affordable Care Act adjusted and took care of so many people. And if it's struck down, people will not have their health care. And this is terrible. But tied to this is the way they are jamming through another appointee to the Supreme Court who has publicly said she would vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. This is terribly unfair. President Obama put forward a candidate over 7 months before his term ended, and they said, no, it's too close to the election. We can't have hearings, we can't have the debate over the nomination. Yet now this administration, the Republican administration, is jamming through a candidate that in their writings has said they would repeal the Affordable Care Act and Roe v. Wade, which would take away the ability of women to make healthcare decisions about their own body. So I'm very, very concerned about that. I think healthcare is a human right, and it's a national disgrace that the Republicans are trying to take it. Now people need it more than ever. I would say the COVID crisis has taught us that we need a national healthcare program to take care of our people. And our hospitals could not have survived without the federal support that came in that helped them cure not only New Yorkers, but the great research they're doing now.
Thank you. Mr. Santiago-Cano, where do you think the healthcare policy discussion should head in the next Congress? If you were elected, where would you try to take it?
Well, Ben, I'm very glad you asked this question because this question hits home for me, all right? As an entrepreneur and a small business owner, I have to pay for my own healthcare, right? And I've learned from experience that the so-called Affordable Care Act that they passed it was simply not affordable when I tried to get healthcare for me. On top of that, you were being punished for not being able to, for not paying for a healthcare system that you cannot afford. That was simply unacceptable. I believe affordable healthcare, it's a major issue in this country. I believe that Congresswoman claims that the Supreme Court wants to overturn Obamacare. Well, Congresswoman, let's remember that one of the main funders of Obamacare was the mandate. The mandate has been removed, meaning that without the mandate, a lot of the funding for the program is gone. So in essence, the so-called Affordable Care Act that was not affordable for me as a small business owner, it's already been repealed, in my opinion. Now, how do we get affordable healthcare? There's many simple things that we can do. We should be creating competition between states. There's no reason why I'm not able to buy healthcare in Connecticut or in New Jersey if they're offering me a better plan for a better price than what I'm offered here, right? Aside from that, the Congresswoman talked about the Supreme Court nominee. Well, again,
last few seconds on that, please.
I love seeing the double standard, right? The law says that if you have a Senate majority, you put forward a Supreme Court justice and they get confirmed. I would bet you if the Democrats had a Senate minority, they wouldn't be talking about this issue at all. You go back to 2016 when Obama made his nomination. Well, Congresswoman, elections have results. And unfortunately, President Obama didn't have a majority in the Senate back in 2016, but we do have it here in 2020 on the Republican side. So we should be moving forward with what it says in the law.
All right, Congresswoman Maloney, you might want to address that in your closing statement. But before we get to closing statements, just a couple quick yes or no questions. As I mentioned early on, I might ask a few right before closing statements. So we'll just do a few yes or no questions. Should the federal government be providing a significant infusion of funds to NYCHA, to New York City public housing? It's over $30 billion in need for a state of good repair. Should there be a massive infusion of federal funds to help save NYCHA? Mr. Santiago-Cano, yes or no?
Yes, but it has to be properly advocated. In the last debate, the Congresswoman says she has a hard time getting accounting from NYCHA.
Congresswoman,
5 years, hard time getting accounting, hard to believe.
A massive infusion of federal funds to NYCHA, yes or no?
Absolutely, yes. And the Republicans in their budget, they proposed cuts NYCHA by $1 billion.
Thank you. Okay, a couple more of these. Congresswoman Maloney, we'll stick with you here first. Do you think that income taxes need to be raised on Americans, households making over $400,000 a year?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Santiago-Cano?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Santiago-Cano, we'll stick with you. Do you believe that marijuana use should be legalized in the United States?
Yes, but I think there has to be some restrictions for major cities that have a high density of population.
Okay. Congresswoman Maloney, marijuana legalization?
Yes.
Okay, and this one could be a quick, short answer, but there's a proposal in Congress known as the Green New Deal. Is that something that you support or would support if elected? Congresswoman Maloney, if re-elected, would you push for the Green New Deal?
Yes, I'm an original co-sponsor of it, and also the Green New Deal for public housing. I issued a report out of the Oversight Committee about 3 weeks ago, coming from Duke University, that showed if the temperature rises 2%, the amount of damage it would do to the health, the well-being and jobs in our city and state would be tremendous. We can act as a city and as a state, which we are, to honor the rules of the Paris Accord. We don't need to follow the president who pulled us out of it. And there are a number of other proposals and bills I have in this area.
Thank you. Before we go to closing statements, Mr. Santiago-Cano, the Green New Deal.
Well, as a millennial, the environment is extremely important to me. However, the Green New Deal has a lot of language in it that will destroy thousands of jobs around the U.S. We care about the environment. We want to take care of the environment. There's many things that we can do without destroying jobs across the country.
We're going to stick with you, Mr. Santiago-Cano, for closing statement. You have 1 minute for your closing statement, and then we'll come to Congresswoman Maloney to close things out. Go ahead.
Well, this year, the people of New York have two choices when they go to the polls in November 3rd here in the 12th Congressional District. You have the choice of the career politician that's been in office for 25 years, and every 2 years keeps making promises about affordable housing, about fixing our healthcare system, about fixing our infrastructure, about fixing our transportation, our education. And yet, 25 years later, we keep having the same problems. It's time for new leadership. It's time for new ideas. It's time for elected officials to be held accountable for their inefficiency and their broken promises. It is also time for term limits, because career politicians, I believe, are the problem with Washington, D.C. Aside from that, I would like to say that it is also time to end party politics. For far too long, and in the recent few years, party politics has become something that people don't even work with each other anymore, and that's just unacceptable. I have always said that I would not have a problem voting with a Democrat if it's going to benefit the people of the 12th Congressional District.
Thank you. And Congressman Maloney, your 1-minute closing statement. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ben, for moderating, MNN for hosting, and Carlos for participating. This race is not about Carlos and me. This race is about you and your choice to participate in our democracy. We need effective progressive representation in Washington by people who can actually get things done, not another Trump Republican. In fact, the last time a Republican represented this district, aid to the city of New York was cut by 75%. That's why I ran against him, defeated him, and ever since, federal dollars have been going up, not down. I'm running for the values I believe in: jobs, better healthcare, protecting our environment. I'm running to represent the greatest city in the world. We need to make sure our city gets its fair share of every single federal dollar, and I am a tiger at making that happen. As chair of the Oversight Committee, I've been a leader on the COVID-19 relief packages that have brought billions to our city for hospitals, schools, mass transit, small businesses, and more. And my record of accomplishment includes winning health care and compensation for our 9/11 first responders, along with 80 other game-changing bills, 10 of which were signed in presidential bill signings. And I've delivered over $10 billion in funding for infrastructure projects, the Kosciuszko Bridge, the L train, and many, many that have brought jobs. He mentioned housing. I put up 7 senior housing, probably more than any other district in the country. I will end now by saying I hope my record in Congress merits your support. I am asking for your vote so I can continue working for you and our great city.
Okay. Thank you to both candidates very much for a spirited debate, and thank you for watching. A reminder, all eligible registered voters can walk in or mail an absentee ballot, or you can participate in early voting October 24th through November 1st, or you can vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. There's a lot of options. Thank you for watching Represent NYC Election Coverage on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. For more election coverage or information, you can visit MNN.org, the League of Women Voters of New York State at LWVNY.org, or us at GothamGazette.com. I'm Ben Max from Gotham Gazette. Thanks again for watching. Remember to vote. Goodbye.